Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session of Win-Loss Week. My name is Cameron Turnbow, and I'm a consultant here at Closed. Today, I'm excited to introduce Ken Westin. Ken works in the competitive intelligence space and is a cybersecurity expert. And we're going to talk today about how he has implemented win-loss analysis with his background in competitive intel and cybersecurity. So first of all, Ken, thanks so much for joining us and welcome.
Great. Thanks for having me, Cameron. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, Ken, maybe to start off, tell me a little bit about your experience with win-loss in your career.
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of people, we kind of stumble into some of these positions, right? I've been working in security probably over the last 15 years. Ended up working very closely with CISOs of very large organizations, a lot of Fortune 500 companies. A lot of times, I became sort of a virtual CISO, and they needed guidance, not just on, hey, we want this tool, but we need to know how to actually get it implemented, or we want to migrate off of this legacy tool, things like that. So it required me to have sort of deep technical knowledge of the competitive landscape of the various tools. I also then started, meeting a lot with the CISOs, and a lot of times I identified it wasn't always the technology that caused us to lose. It was other reasons, whether it was our legal contracts or things like that. And that's when I really started getting much more interested in competitive intelligence, when I started realizing that it always isn't, it's not just about competitive, it's also about, making your organization stronger, identifying weaknesses and gaps to make the whole process much easier, not just the technology, but also the people in the process side of it as well.
Cool. No, that's awesome. And yeah, you're a little unique with some of the people we've worked with in the past, where you do come from a cybersecurity background, and it kind of has that mixture with competitive intelligence as well. Tell us about that. How is it that you became involved in competitive intelligence with a cybersecurity background, and what parallels do you see there?
Sure. Well, it's actually very similar. There's, you have competitive intelligence and you have threat intelligence, right? One thing that we leverage a lot in security is open source intelligence and open source information. And that's something that competitive intelligence folks leverage quite a bit, whether it's in, open source and doing interviews and things like that with customers, or identifying maybe some briefings that have been done with, financial analysts, things like that. It's sort of your job as a competitive intelligence person to go out there and actually find all this open information that's out there. Sometimes it's a bit of a scavenger hunt, right? But you also still have to, connect the dots and actually start to make that information actually actionable, because otherwise it's just data, right? So it's sort of the same role of if you're doing cybersecurity, threat analyst work or anything like that, you need to convert that into intelligence that's actually actionable, that the organization can then act on.
Cool. No, that's cool. Yeah, actionable insights. We hear that a lot. And I think we're going to probably talk about it today for sure, of different ways to drive into those actionable insights. Well, first question in terms of kind of the win-loss program. Talk to me about what you found to be key factors in creating a successful win-loss program. What are the top three things that you found to have a successful program?
Well, I can speak to this based on my mistakes. That'll help. But I think a lot of it is when you are in a competitive intelligence space, you have to sort of set the right expectations within the organization, especially if you're fairly new, if it's a new department or a new initiative, particularly like sales folks, they're going to say, okay, you're competitive intelligence. I need you to give me battle cards, right? So then that's what competitive intelligence is. Or if you're working with the product teams, establish that, hey, you're an ally, you're here to try to make this process much stronger, make the product stronger, actually making sure that we win more deals. I'm not actually, working for a competitor, I'm not trying to make you look bad. These are sorts of things that I think, it's not around the technology, but this is kind of around the people and the process side to set those expectations.
Totally.
I think then the next phase too is to identify what's realistic. A lot of times I'm finding competitive intelligence folks, you're sometimes a one-man army or a one-woman army, right? So, how are you going to be able to do this work? At one point, I was actually tracking over 100 competitors across 4 different solutions. And it just seemed untenable for one person to be able to manage that. So if you do that, you can start to identify, once you identify kind of what you're trying to accomplish, you can start leveraging automation or bringing in services side of it. It's very, very similar to what we see in security. Like if I'm a one security analyst, I can't be expected to protect the entire organization. I actually have to maybe bring in help to set up some of these tools, or, bring in a managed detection and response service to come in and help me actually with the detection capabilities.
Yeah.
Same thing with competitive intelligence. A lot of times I find that they're under-resourced. You may make a nice salary, things like that, but you still are going to be understaffed, I think, in competitive intel. I see that across the board. But you can find, some of those alliances that you can make within the org. I think once you establish those sort of what you're trying to accomplish, you then, get the connections with the right people. Then when you start to move forward, then you also need to make sure you have executive buy-in. That's another key thing, is that if you don't have that executive buy-in, I think your competitive intelligence, whatever you're trying to do, is going to fail. If you don't have support from above, again, that's kind of talks about making things actionable, right? That's actually really critically important. Is you need to, like, if you're conducting interviews or if you're gathering other information, you need to make that actually actionable for the field. You can't just provide them a battle card and these are their features, these are ours, have at it, right? You really need to dig a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah, that's excellent. A lot of good things you said there. Even some things that just resonate with me is, it sounds like, yeah, the relationship component, whether it's with executive buy-in or even just like you said, different departments, right? Like help them see this isn't a witch hunt, right? Like help them realize we're not coming at you for your job. We're just trying to, make your job easier. And I think a lot of times what I've noticed in my experience is once they start to see the output and the results, they realize, oh, this is here to help me, right? And it almost like kind of creates that buy-in as well. And then having that executive leadership allows you to kind of do something about it. So excellent. And I think that's a fantastic point. So how to get the ball started? What advice would you give to someone just starting, a win-loss program?
I would say don't plan on it being done quickly, right? This is something that it's not just going to be one program and you're done. Because really the goal of establishing the win-loss program is to set benchmarks, right, moving forward, and make incremental improvements over time. So that's really critically important. So you don't just want to go out there and dump a bunch of information on the executives. Like this is what I found. Read the report, read the interviews.
Yeah.
It's your job to actually identify the insights. And so it's really important to think strategically, right? So a lot of times you're going to get pulled into a lot of things like sales deals. It'll be very tactical, but it's really your job to look strategically at the organization. How do we compete? Where are we actually losing deals? Where are we winning deals across the organization? Again, is it the technology? Is it the product? Is it the sales process? Is it legal? Right? Sort of understanding that sort of 30,000-foot view of what you're actually looking at. And trying to maintain that, like that's really challenging, especially as you start getting pulled into a lot of different projects and again, sales deals, things like that. You may run into some strange competitor you've never even heard before. You can't find information on them. But then you find out, this is the only deal we've actually seen for this particular competitor, right? So is it really a good use of my time to be spending on this when I should be doing, other things, right? So I think time management's another challenge as well, of course.
Yeah. Figure that's good. Yeah. Figure out where you can provide value. Yep. And really target that. That's excellent. Awesome. So in terms of, your competitive intelligence programs, other than win-loss data, what else do you do? What other types of information or programs do you use in your with competitive intelligence?
Well, what I really love to do is actually look at the competitor strategy, because I feel like that provides a window into maybe our own strategy within the organization. I started, even if it's not a direct competitor, really kind of keeping an eye on the industry. So I would actually lean on a lot of the interviews that were conducted by financial analysts, because a lot of times the CTO and the CFO, they like to brag about things to investors that they wouldn't necessarily tell customers and things like that. And a lot of really valuable information comes out about that, because one thing I really like to look at is where's the puck going, right? It's one thing to see where we're at now, but it's my job, if I'm doing competitive intelligence, it's not about where we're winning, losing now, it's how we're going to win in the future. And so I think it's really critically important to kind of have that mentality and really focus on the strategy. And there's other data sources that you would have for that. I think win-loss interviews are a great component and a complement to that, because a lot of times you'll start to identify some of these themes, like these are what customers are actually starting to look for. And actually we're seeing that this is the direction some of our competitors are heading with regard to their product roadmap and things like that. So that can actually change the whole trajectory and direction of the company as well.
No, that's cool. Yeah. And that kind of leads into what, I want to ask you next was, how do you take that win-loss data and work it with other data that you are working with that you described?
Yeah, a lot of that, I think it's competitive intelligence. It's a little bit of an art and science. So I think I'm lucky. I have a liberal arts background, but also some technical acumen. So I'm pretty good at sort of drawing some of those the dots and the connections. I really when like working with Closed, it was great because you guys did very thorough interviews, and so not only did I have access to the insights, but I also have access to the full interviews themselves. And so I actually really go through there and I'll look for it. I might even load it into a database where I can actually search for keywords, things like that, to identify things that are coming out of some of these interviews as well. Yeah, but it's, it really depends. I've done competitive intel for a few different companies now, and it really depends on the product. And it's almost like every single company is going to be a snowflake, and different tools and different data sources are going to be relevant for some industries than others, and even within a company, right? So there's not really an easy answer, but I think the interviews are going to be a core. I think sometimes that's where you can get started, where you can actually start to identify some of these gaps, where we're actually losing some of these deals, or why we're winning as well, why they like a particular competitor, right? I think those are sometimes a good place to start. Very similar to security, right? We have an alert that gets fired, something suspicious. That's where we start the investigation, and then we start to gather additional information to provide more context around that. And competitive intelligence is very, very similar.
Cool. That's good. So can we talk today, about maybe the types of data that's out there, maybe how to gather some of this data as well. Let's talk about, kind of going back to what we talked at the beginning, these actionable insights. What are some effective ways that you found in sharing this win-loss data, this competitive intelligence data, to actually influence the strategy? What experiences have you had there?
Well, one thing I started kind of doing was providing some exclusivity, right? So when I started getting some of this information and gathering some of these insights, I would maybe reach out to the product team and say, hey, I've been doing these interviews, before I share this with sales or other folks here, I want to run this by you to see if, these theories and the things that we're actually seeing resonate with you. How is this maybe aligned with the roadmap that we currently have, kind of come up with a story that comes around that. I think that's going to be really helpful. So
cool. That's helpful. Awesome. What wins have you experienced from using win-loss analysis?
Well, I think one thing we've identified in one process was that it wasn't an issue with regards to the product itself. A lot of times people love the product, or they love the sales folks, they love the people that were involved. But one case, we actually ran into situations where it was legal. We actually lost several deals as a result of some of the legal contracts. It was just too complex, too cumbersome, and it actually derailed a lot of the sales processes. And so spent some time working with the sales team and the legal teams to try to refine that a bit. And they made it much easier for them to actually close some of these deals. And it was actually a known issue within the organization at the time. They knew this was a challenge. They were already trying to staff for it. But when we really kind of narrowed in that this was a serious problem, it was actually affecting the bottom line, and it actually tied a dollar value to some of these deals that were lost. That accelerated that initiative much more quickly. So that's just one example. But then there's a lot of that where you start to identify these gaps, and it's so funny is like competitive intel, people think it's the sales process or it's the product. And it's usually none of those things. It's something else that's in between that's actually causing friction for the customer that you need to identify.
No, that's fascinating, Ken. And that maybe, a lot of times with people we work with, we'll hear that, that they know this. They're like, oh yeah, we'll share some insights and say, oh yeah, we already know that. And kind of maybe what you're saying, where it's like, you knew this was an issue with legal, but by being able to now have evidence, maybe a little bit more data, you can actually start weighting things and be like, you know what? Yeah, this part of the product is a concern, but this legal thing is even a higher concern, right? And then you can start to even like prioritize that way as well. And so, yeah, I think that's a fascinating example. So, well, awesome. Well, Ken, any final thoughts, today, anything we haven't discussed today that you feel like would be helpful for people either starting on a win-loss program or, kind of driving these actionable insights?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it is don't try to go it alone. I think sometimes people feel like, hey, I got to be the competitive guru. You got to lean on the people on your team. I think leaning on external services as well, such as Close, can be really helpful, especially when you have a small resource constrained team. You really need to, look at what you're trying to accomplish, and then, reach out and partner with the folks within your organization, as well as on the services side to make sure you're driving that forward.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Ken, thanks again. I feel like this has been a very insightful conversation. And so really do appreciate your time today.
Great. Thanks, Cameron. Appreciate it.